Join us now then on this trip through history to see what's happened to the 38th over those 25 years. Here we are at Butcher's Coppice in 1976. We weren't going over there originally, but it was a very dry summer and there were fires where we'd planned to go. So at the last minute, literally with days' notice, we had to move and change to Butcher's Coppice, where the grass was very dry. So here we are, loading and setting off. Peter Clyde in his Land Rover, and with a horse box full of our equipment, on our way down to Bournemouth. The ground, as you can see, was absolutely brown. There'd been no rain for ages. Lee Armstrong. And Mark Webb enjoying breakfast. There's Alan Taylor, Alan Evans, and that's got to be Helen. And then we went on a trip off to I'm trying to think where this was now. There's Webb, Glyn Westcott, one of the leaders. This was along the south coast, the other side of Swanage, to the west of Swanage. In fact, I think that's Swanage that we can see down in the bay. Roger Farrand. And there's Poole Harbour and Bouncy Island in the distance. Really clear sky, very hot, and then a monument that everybody tried to climb on at the same time, and the done thing was to leap off, so that's what everybody did. And all get covered in dust at the same time. And then we had a trip to the Isle of Wight, where we spent the day fishing and being on the beach, and generally an enjoyable, easy day. There's Arcala watching the fishing. And crabs, lots of crabs. And it was a really hot summer's day on the Isle of Wight. And then off we set again back to the mainland, about 3/4 of an hour across to the mainland from the Isle of Wight. I think that's Simon and somebody else. David Shettle there, I think. And so we pulled in back to the mainland, and then along to Sandbanks. There's Matthew Day. And Sue White that came along to help us. And there's Helen Day, and Matthew. And we spent a good day on the beach at Sandbanks. There's Roger Farrand. And nothing like a pool for paddling in. It had been a very, very long hot summer, so hardly a day went by when we didn't have some time in the pool, which was on the site in Butcher's Coppice, a scout site that had been around for years, so long in fact that it was originally outside of Bournemouth, but was now surrounded by a housing estate, and so there had to be a guard every night to make sure that local layabouts didn't come in and steal things, and yet actually they did, and we lost some cooking equipment. But it was certainly a welcome relief from the heat of the sun, which had caused all sorts of problems that summer, including us to change site at the last minute because the original site was in a forest and it was on fire. But suddenly there was a change, a rainbow, and at the end of the camp, the bank holiday, it absolutely threw it down, and because the ground was so hard, everybody's equipment got flooded. But it soon cleared up, and we were back on the beach again, enjoying ourselves. And just checking the flagpole, make sure it stays up, and then the flag got stuck, so Roger Farrand had to shin up the flagpole and sort out the flag at the top. I think it took a couple of attempts before we actually got it right, but that didn't excuse him from peeling potatoes. Here we got Matthew Lewis preparing something or other, and Robert Webb dishing out the mashed potatoes along with Simon there. This was Glyn Westcott's wife being sent down the aerial runway. It was only a short one, but it was used so much that when we came to take it down, the knots were so tight that we couldn't actually undo it and had to cut the rope, because there was a huge amount of leverage on it with this great big block there, and some gas cylinders were used as a braking system. And that was the leaders and family outside our tent having dinner. This was the attempt to undo the knot that I talked about, but I don't think in the end we completely managed to do it. And so yet another time in the pool to cool off from the hot sun. In the end we only had about 7 there because we're halfway through the camp. 2 boys didn't want to continue and went home. And then we had a trip to the local airport where we were shown around the control tower at Bournemouth. One of the leaders, Glyn Westcott, doing some cooking. We often had a scheme where one leader would eat out with a patrol, and that tended to improve the standards, because they knew if they were cooking for a leader, they made a little bit more effort to make sure that things were edible. There's David Shettle again, gnawing his way through a piece of chicken. And Roger breaking the flag, which is now functioning normally after his repair. That was what's called a staged push-in, especially for the camera, and then a rescue. It seems that all we ever do at Scout Camp is to eat and go on hikes, but we had a hedgehog that kept appearing and was fed with milk and bread. The trouble is, other times are so busy that there were only certain occasions when Skip had the opportunity to get the cine camera out and record some scenes. Matthew, I think that's Matthew Lewis, yes, been staked out and forcibly fed. It became something of a ritual at camp. Here we've got a sort of shot put competition. And a bit of a sports day. A relay race here. And some other victim being pegged out. It's all flag based, this one. Perhaps it's because it was all fine weather, so we were able to get the camera out frequently when there were things going on. Looks like rice. Oh, I believe that is the thing that appeared on every menu of every camp: chicken supreme and rice. The chicken supreme did come out of a catering pack. It wasn't anything made too easily. And then Skip's having a sleep. Well, the time is nearly gone. Peter Klein's come down with his Land Rover and vehicle. We're having a closing prayer and a closing flag down, which brings summer camp at Butcher's Coppice almost to an end. And that was it. Final demolition of the flagpole. Everything else is packed away, and off goes Peter and his Land Rover and horse box with most of the equipment for summer camp. And so the end of Butcher's Coppice. A month after Butcher's Coppice, some of the leaders went to the Girlwell reunion and then experienced a sort of mock-up of some of the early scout camps and what they were like, and Semaphore, which disappeared from scout training, but then more up-to-date things like a hovercraft and lots of other interesting activities. I did have a go on that. And then there was a huge scout zone at which Lady Baden-Powell, who was by then in a wheelchair, attended. We also had 1,000 Boy Scouts of America representative, including one here who came from Hawaii and was speaking to Keith. And at the end of the service, Lady Baden-Powell asked for the microphone and spoke for 25 minutes. It was the last time she ever spoke in public because she passed away the following February. And so here she is speaking to those 4,000 people assembling for Scout Zone at the end of the Girlwell reunion. Behind her there was a daughter who then became the only surviving member of the Baden-Powell family. and then further activities. An example of a police horse, and how it could deal with noisy cars and people hooting and doing all sorts of things. One of the exhibits at the reunion. And then I'll leave Baden-Powell, our last time to see her before she finished her time on this earth, and she was then, her remains were then taken to join her husband in Kenya, and on his gravestone is a circle and a dot, the tracking sign for Gone Home. And these were some of the mementos that were given to the Baden-Powells over their lifetime as they travelled the world. And here towards the end of the reunion, a tethered balloon ascent from a area of Gilwell known as Woodlands. I didn't have a chance to go on that because there was a very long queue for it. Twice as many as normal attended this, including 2 jumbos full of scout leaders from all across the North Americas, who were very conspicuous by their red jackets. And then afterwards it was followed by a tradition of afternoon tea on the lawn, a tradition that no longer is continued. And here we have some American Scouters who spent some time with both Keith and Sandra. 76 was a particularly special year for Scouting, being the 50th anniversary of the time that the first leaders were trained in Gilwell in 1926, after a wealthy Scottish businessman bought Gilwell Park for the enormous sum of £7,000 and donated it to Baden-Powell for the use of camping, so that at last young poor Scouts in the London area had somewhere they could camp without travelling a long distance. The expansion of London's now caught up with it, although it's on the edge of Epping Forest, just within a few hundred yards of the entrance is housing. So, like so many campsites, it's now surrounded by houses.